In this first lesson, we are going to teach you the basics of GarageBand and how to understand GarageBand on iOS before you start making music. This is going to be very important. Before we can actually start making music, we are going to have to understand how this GarageBand app works. First, open up your GarageBand app, and it's going to bring us to something like this. Look on the screen. What do you see? In the top left corner, you see on my iPhone, right there at the top, you see GarageBand. And then you see some features and functions at the bottom. So the top left, where it says on my iPhone, it's a back button. So if you tap that button, it'll just bring you back. And all it does is it brings you through your files. So you know how you have a file organizer or a files app on your phone. Basically, it's the same function. With this feature, you're able to go through the various folders on your phone to find, GarageBand music projects that you've worked on. This next feature, if you tap at the very top where it says GarageBand, it shows you the folder that your music is in. So you tapping this right here, all it is it's showing you the folder that your music is in. So example, I tap it and it shows my music is in the GarageBand folder, and it shows how many gigabytes of my music is in the GarageBand folder. Up here in the top right corner, you have 3 objects. The first one on the very left, the microphone, it basically just opens up a quick track, a quick recording track for you so you can get straight to recording. The second one with the plus button, all it does is open up a quick track. It's basically a quick access panel. So you know how like computers and phones have shortcuts? That's basically all that is, to just jump straight into the game. Now, the very top right, all it is really is an organization feature. So if you tap those 3 dots and you're like me, you like everything to be organized. So if you scroll down, you can organize your GarageBand layout in several ways. If you tap icons, it has your folders listed as icons. If you tap list, instead of you having icons, it puts everything in a list format. Let's look at the very bottom here. You have 3 options: recents, shared, and browse. Recents, all the recents is doing is telling you what your last project that you worked on was. Let's say the last song that I was working on was called Hill of Crosses. Instead of having to go through all of my folders trying to find Hill of Crosses, since I know the last song I worked on was Hill of Crosses, I can tap Recents, and right there on the very left, you can see Hill of Crosses. Shared is very interesting. Let's say you want one of your friends who also has an iPhone to make music with you, right? You can long click on a song. Long click and hold it, and it has an option to share, right? And you can share it as a song, as a ringtone, or a project. Now, if you're trying to, have one of your friends work on the song with you, you would share it as a project, right? So anytime you share a project that you are working on with a friend, it'll show up right under here in shared. All Browse does is Browse allows you to go through your iPhone files to try to find any GarageBand files you may have. That's all it does. Now that you understand how this central hub works once opening the app, now let's jump into song creation. Now remember, there are 3 ways you can create a song here. There's the first method at the top right where you can just jump straight into a mic recording track. There's a second method at the top right where you can hit plus and just jump straight into a quick track creation. This is what I recommend doing instead. Far left, you see a feature that says create song. That is what I think you should tap. That is what I always believe everyone should tap. So tap create song. So it'll give you several options with how you want to create a song or how you want to start out creating a song. You can start out with using a mic. You can start out with using digital strings or regular, violins if you have them, etc., etc. But since this is just the beginning tutorial, we want to start out with a blank slate without using mics, without using strings, without using anything, just so we can understand the software we're using first before we actually make anything. So what we'll do is we'll scroll all the way over to keyboard and we'll tap Alchemy Synth. And then in the very top right, we'll tap the 3rd button. And that 3rd button basically shows you your entire workstation, all the tracks you've recorded on this one project. And so this is where we have our blank slate. And in this little blank area, this is your workstation. This is, like I said, every track that you're going to be recording in your project or your song. This is where you're going to see all the instrumentals you're using on your song, etc., etc. And I am going to have to explain everything that you see here before we get into the actual song creation. On the top left menu, it brings down a drop down menu, and this drop down menu, depending on what you're doing, is going to have several functions. But most of the time, the drop down menu will just bring you back to the very main menu from the very beginning of the video. Then you have the second feature. The second feature, it's basically a quick access to opening up a new instrument. So if you tap the second feature, it'll just bring you back to this screen. So if you want, a shortcut to opening up a mic track, or a shortcut to, opening up a string track, or a shortcut to adding in a bass track, that's all that does. And the third button at the very top will basically open up a digital control panel of whatever instrument you're using. So for example, on this first track, we are using a digital synthesizer keyboard. So if we tap that third button at the top, that digital synthesizer keyboard is going to pop up, right? And if we go back to the top left and tap the top left, we can change the keyboard type. So we can go from Epic Clouds Formation, and we can go to something like a classical grand piano. It has multiple functions. You can change pitch, you can change all sorts of stuff. You can play around with that and figure that one out yourself. Go back to your track workstation, tap the third button at the top as always. It'll always bring you back to this. The fourth button is the track settings feature. So if you tap that, it'll show all the different things you can do on track, where you can adjust the track volume. You have track pan, which basically means in a nutshell, if you want the audio to sound like it's coming out of the left side of your headphone, you'd pan it to the left. If you want it to sound like it's coming out of the right side of your headphone or speaker, pan it to the right. You can mute the track here, or you can make it where the track's not muted and it only plays through your headphones. And you have compressor. Basically, this compresses the sound quality to basically push out harsher sound frequencies. If you have a high treble voice like me, then sometimes will, clip through your headphones and it'll sound ugly, so you can use the compressor feature. Now, right here, these things I'm showing you, y'all, this is the easy, simplified version. In the later tutorial, we are going to get into the more advanced features on editing your bass in your song, or editing your treble in your song or your audio recording. Basics. So if you're a newbie and you don't know how to use treble or bass, you have a quick access easy slider just to, mess around with. So this should be less treble if you move it to the left on your recording track. This should be more treble if you move it to the right. If you scroll all the way down to Master Effects, like I said, this is all easy access before you get into the advanced stuff, which we'll talk about in a later lesson. You have echo, so you can turn the echo on the track up. You can turn it down. So, show you a quick example. I'm going to show you what it sounds like when you use these quick access easy features for beginners. We're going to mess around with the reverb. Without reverb. Then we're going to turn the reverb all the way up. See? Yeah, you can notice the difference. So what I want you to do is I want you to, just play around with these easy access features. They're easy access features before we get into the more advanced features. Now, this next button right here at the top is FX. So you can add crazy effects to the track. So for example, right? And you can just play around with that if you want. And then right here in the middle, you have three buttons. You have your play button. Tap play, the song plays. Tap it again, the song stops playing. And right there to the left of it, you have a rewind back to the beginning of the track button. So let's say you're all the way over here on the right side of the song, and you don't want to have to scroll all the way back. You can just tap this button right here. It'll rewind all the way back to the beginning of track. Then, of course, the red circle button, as everybody knows, is the recording button. So if you want to record, you just tap that recording button. And most of the time, here's something fun. Most of the time, you don't even got to bring up the piano. You can just tap the recording button, and the piano pops up for you. Next button you have after that is the metronome. And basically a metronome is a tool used to visually show you the speed of the song. So if it's a slow-paced song, so example, I'll delete these. If it's a slow-paced song, you can tap the metronome and you can see it move back and forth, right? And why is that metronome important? A lot of artists and rappers, they want to make sure that they stay on track and they're not getting ahead of the instrumental. Like, you're rapping quicker than the beat does, or you're singing ahead of the beat, or you're singing behind the beat. So a lot of artists will use this metronome feature so they can make sure that they're on point with the beat. Let's say I accidentally recorded a track. Oops, did not mean to record this. I can either do one of two things. I can either just tap the button and it'll undo that mistake that I made, or I can hold the button and it brings down two options. You can either redo the recording, or you can just hold it down and hit undo recording. Now, this next option at the top is one of the best features you will ever use. Do you know what loops are? And if you're not familiar with loops is basically a piece of audio that loops over and over and over again. So, example, let's say you have a band, but you guys don't have a drummer, and you guys need a drum track. You can tap loops this little button right here next to the back button. You can tap the loop, and it has all these pre-recorded loops by Apple. So they're basically drum tracks, piano tracks, vocal tracks, all made by Apple, and they have all these different types of genres you can switch to too, and you can go through them and you can see what you like. We'll take an example. You can grab a Chicago blues drum set, drag it onto the track, and it plays the Chicago blues drum, right? And the cool thing about this is if you go to the next button on the top right, the settings button, and you go down to the tempo, and remember, tempo is just the speed of the song, speed of the track. You can adjust the tempo of your song, and we'll adjust it to a higher pace song. It'll affect the drum track, so the drum track will be moving a lot faster now. Watch this. You can go back, and you can change it. Notice how it changes speed, right? If you're going to change the tempo, make sure you change the tempo before you record anything, because if you record a ton of things and then you change the tempo, it'll affect all recordings, and it can turn out to be a mess. Then you have the time signature for which you want to put the time signature in the song. Then you have the key signature. If you decide you want to use auto-tune on a song, because GarageBand has an auto-tune feature, you can change it to the appropriate key that matches the auto-tune, or the appropriate key or pitch of the song, and auto-tune will basically be like, okay, I see you're trying to sing in an A major, we'll switch their voice to an A major, right? So if you're trying to figure out how many seconds in a song something is playing, hold on, then you can see the seconds up here. This is literally your ruler up here, your ruler of measurement of the song. So like a ruler you can measure in inches, you can measure the song up here. That's why it's called a time ruler. Go back to the settings. You have fade out. What's fade out do? Let's say you guys have heard a lot of 80s songs. A lot of 80s songs, the song fades out. If you turn on fade out, it fades out the song for you. So, for example, listen as the drum fades out. Yeah, and then you have several other features in the settings, and we'll go to advanced because this is very important. Tap advanced and go to run in background, and this is why I recommend you tap run in background. If you turn on your iPhone battery saver will turn off any apps that are being used in the background, right? And let's say you did not save your GarageBand song, and your battery saver will then close that song without your consent. And why this could be bad, because if you did not save it, sometimes it'll auto-save. If you did not save it, then you probably just lost a lot of progress. So I'd recommend turning that on. Now we're going to look at a few more features before we move on to our final lesson. Notice these two things I'm tapping. These are called tracks. Think of a race, a human race where everybody runs on the same big track, but they have their own lanes. This is basically a track. You have your piano track, you have your drum track. You can have multiple drum tracks. So, for example, I can tap the drum and tap duplicate. Boom, we have another drum track, right? We can tap piano, add another one. Or you can tap the plus right here in the bottom left, and then you get to choose which instrument you want to add. So we'll add an audio recorder, right? Boom. Tap into top left where the third button to bring you back to your track workstation. Boom, you can see every track you have here. And the last basic feature you need to know is basically this. Let's say you want to extend the time of your song. Because right now we have the time ruler feature on, so we only have about 50 seconds in this song to record. Let's say I want to have a lot more time in the song. On the very far right, it says tap plus above to change the length of the song. So you will tap this mini plus, and it'll change the entire length of the song, and you can change it to how you like. I would not recommend doing automatic. I would turn off automatic and change and make sure this manual feature shows up, because then you can change the length of the song. Alright everybody, I lied. There's actually 2 more final things I need to show you for the basics. Let's say you want to learn to save your song, so you don't, lose all your progress you made. In the top left, tap the arrow and tap My Songs. It'll bring you back down to the menu, but it'll automatically save your song. Lastly, let's say you're wanting to record, right? And you add a mic in. What I recommend doing is, because sometimes when you record, sometimes when you tap the mic thing, it'll use the last type of mic that you chose. So tap voice, and what it'll do, go to the top left. Under My Songs, it has a microphone. Tap that. Go down to the last category, Fun, and click Clean. Basically, we just changed the microphone effect right there. The effect that's going to be on our voice. When you tap the Clean effect, it's the raw recorded audio of your voice. Whereas if we tap a monster effect, it'll record our voice in a monster-like voice. Now that you know how to record songs and add instruments, let's move on to the next lesson.